I also got to know what are the services that the wellness center at IISc provides. Um, yeah. Okay. Before I jump into the presentation, I would firstly like to thank all the students that are present here. My idea is that the invitation went out to the entire student body. So I think people from varied age groups will be here, and perhaps some people from the faculty and staff and other departments as well. Um, Something about else about me. It has already been said that I am a mental health professional, and um talking about gender, sexuality, especially gender beyond the binary, is something that gets me personally also motivated to get out of bed, and always happy to talk about those topics. Um, for today, I would like to begin by probably trying to understand some of the expectations that are there from all those people who have joined, who've taken out the time um, to engage with this workshop. I'd like to keep it interactive. I do have a presentation, but I would like to keep it interactive. And if some of you can uh, if the bandwidth allows, I'm sure, can turn on your cameras and also share some of the expectations that you have from today's workshop. Anybody? Or if people want to type in the chat box, that is also good.
Can you repeat, ma'am?
Hello.
I think someone had asked, requested to repeat what you said earlier.
Ah, okay. Is my voice not loud enough?
Yeah, it is clear. It is clear.
Okay, okay. Okay, I was asking that before I jump into the presentation and me taking over the kind of the speaking stage, I wanted to understand from the participants here about their expectations from this workshop. And yeah, I do have something in the chat. Yes. Okay. I'd like to acknowledge the chat, the question in the chat, and probably we can talk about it. Okay. Okay. Does anyone want to turn on their camera and also um, share apart from the ones in the chat already there?
There are some questions in the chat box.
Yeah. Yes, I am reading the chat box simultaneously. I have noted all the three.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I feel that this talk probably will be sort of a sensitization for the IC community about LGBTQ issues in the campus and how it is difficult for the students uh, who belong to the community to both like feel free to express themselves at the same time do their science or work in the campus, and how for other students it is sort of norm, and for people belonging to community it becomes difficult at times because of the triggers around inequality, discrimination, and like much more.
Thank you for sharing.
It appears there's a network issue.
Like, is
Mr.
this
Kita?
video has gotten stuck? Okay.
Probably Miss Nikita can maybe
Just
switch off the video to get maybe more bandwidth.
Okay, sir. I'll just coordinate with her. Miss Nikita, can you hear me?
yeah, I can.
Yeah, your video is actually stuck, but we can hear your audio.
Oh,
Probably, can you turn
okay.
off your video so that, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can hear me well.
Yeah, now it's audible.
I'll try to understand, but I can only see questions in the screen.
Do you want to leave the meeting and join again? Because now your voice is also like,
Yeah, I think I'll join again.
yeah, yeah, sure. Hello, Nikita, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
you?
now it's fine. It's fine, it's clear. Yeah,
Okay. The video is also clear?
yeah, it's clear.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. I think there's something else in the chat. I'll just catch on with that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I have a fair understanding of at least some of the expectations that have come up. I'd like to address as many of them as possible, and I think many of them will be probably addressed during the workshop. But if any of them, any other questions that you have, I have thought of doing a question answer and comment session at the end of the workshop. So whatever I'm not able to address during the presentation, please feel free to ask that later. All right. Okay, so I wanted to clarify this one thing. Um, why do we feel the need to talk about LGBTQ inclusion and LGBTQ mental health? First thing that I want to clarify, um, that there are certain historical theories, historical paradigms that have put same-sex sexuality and transness as abnormal, as pathological, as mental illnesses. And I am not at all perpetuating that idea over here when we're talking about mental health. The sole purpose of this workshop is to understand that yes, there are certain marginalities, discrimination, inequalities, invisibilization that exist because of gender and sexuality that is seen as so-called outside the binary, and that it is that marginality which puts anyone from the queer and trans community vulnerable to mental health concerns. And it is in the light of those mental health concerns arising out of structural inequalities which we're trying to understand here. My language mostly will be English and perhaps in some places Hindi. If at any point you find any of my terminology, any usage of my words um, not understandable, please do ask that in the chat box only. You need not wait till the end because I will be using certain words that are more common uh, to LGBTQ health and LGBTQ identities, and it is very much possible that some of those words may not be in everyone's vocabulary. So please feel free to ask in between as well. Yes, so having clarified this thing, also I want to clarify again. The history that we have had with respect to gender and sexuality. Just wanted to talk about that briefly. It's a very common idea that we hear from the older as well as the younger generation, that it is in the modernization and westernization of Indian culture that we're talking about LGBTQ identities, which is very funny because we now have very clear evidence, research, and facts that say that pre colonial India never was against same sex sexuality, never talked about same sex sexuality as something that needs to be repressed. It is only in the colonial times that we have um, documented legal and religious beliefs against same sex sexuality. So it's mostly from the European as well as American contexts, based on religious ideals and legal ideals, that India has had a law and considers it sinful to engage in same sex sexuality. And when I'm saying same sex sexuality, I am using it as an umbrella term because there's still very less understanding as far as legal matters go about um, anything else under the LGBTQ umbrella. So, same sex sexuality or homosexuality is the oldest word that we have, which was also given from the scientific community of that time, which has also been questioned time and again. So in today's time, I
Nikita, we are
will be
not able
talking.
to hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is it better with my video off?
Yeah, now it is.
Yeah. Okay, then I guess it's. I'll keep the video off only then. Is this fine?
Yeah, it's clear now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I don't know what was audible, but yeah, I was talking about this thing that it is not that India is becoming more modernized and westernized while when it is talking about LGBTQ identities. It's only from the colonial history that we have something documented against LGBTQ communities. Now, in the 21st century, we have seen a series of apologies from American as well as European psychiatric and legal associations for repressing same-sex sexuality, and it's in that light that we are also in India talking about the discrimination we've had for the last, actively at least for the last 200 years from the colonial times. So yes, so this was one of the notions that I wanted to clarify, that uh, yes, we are moving ahead, but it's not that LGBTQ inclusion is a Western concept or anything. It is very much Indian, as all of us are. Okay, I'd like to probably start with the presentation now. Uh, is the slideshow visible?
Yeah, it is. It is. I hope everyone can see it, right?
Sure.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Also, Catherine, I have a request from you. While I'm
Yes.
playing presentation, I will not be able to see the chat box. So if there is
Yeah.
anything that needs to be addressed then
Yeah.
and there, please feel free to stop me and
Yeah,
I'd
sure.
like to
I'll
answer.
follow it up.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. So, yes, for just starters to just understand what is this alphabet soup that we're talking about, LGBTQIA plus, and when we say gender and sexuality, what all does it actually entail? So this is called a gender-bred person, and this is again anyway the Christmas time. So some of you might anyway be very well aware of uh, 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 what is called a gingerbread man. So the inspiration is from there, calling it a gender-bred person to try and understand what are the different components of gender and sexuality. Um, Starting from something that I think everyone, I think every human that is born is made aware of, which is their sex, the sex that is assigned to them, which is based on the external genitalia. Why I say external genitalia is because sex comprises not just of external genitalia but also of the chromosomes and hormonal distribution. But when we are
Nikita,
when we
sorry to stop you. I think the slides, we're not moving the slides, right? I mean,
yeah,
you're on the third slide,
I'm on the gender bread person slide.
but we are on the first slide. It shows the first slide now. Yeah, now okay, now it's fine. Now it's fine.
Okay, I'll see. I don't know if I'll be able to move, but we'll see.
I
Okay.
will follow it up. Now it's I think
Okay.
yeah, now it's visible.
Yeah, you can see the gender bread person now.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So yes, I was saying that based on the external genitalia, every human is assigned a sex at birth. And usually that sex is either of three, male, female, or intersex. Uh, Hardly 1% or 2% people are assigned intersex at birth. Most of the people fall into the category of male or female based on how their external genitalia looks uh, to scientific and medical experts as well as perhaps their family members as well. Yeah. Um, the second thing that we'll talk about in this is the gender expression. So, gender expression, as you can see, it's a whole arrow from the head to the toe of the person. And gender expression is basically a person's way of carrying themselves, their attire, their body language, their communication style, which could be on a spectrum from masculinity to androgyny to femininity to non-binary to trans, anything that matches their or conforms with their gender identity. Now, what is gender identity? Is it's a person's internal experience of their own gender. It need not be visible to anyone outside, and it may not be same as the sex that they were assigned at birth. The sex that they were assigned at birth could be male, female, or intersex, and the gender identity that they do possess could be either of those three or could be anything else. I will probably touch upon some of the gender identities in the next slide. Sexual orientation. So it's a common understanding with respect to binary genders that gender is the thing that defines your sexual orientation. So I would like to clarify here that gender and sexual orientation or sexuality are different parallels. They need not be related with an equal to sign. Just because someone is assigned male at birth and also identifies as a male, that they will be attracted to women only. Their sexuality and sexual orientation can be irrespective of the sex assigned at birth, irrespective of their gender expression, and irrespective of their gender identity. But yes, an overall understanding of sexual orientation is one is who one is sexually and or romantically attracted to. So that was a simpler understanding of components of gender and sexuality. I have also taken this a little more complicated picture of exactly same four components. Um, and why I say complicated is because I understand that somebody who's probably just trying to understand about queer identities, it can seem overwhelming to know a lot of words and concepts at one go. But what I think will be useful is to try and understand some of these identities as not linear. So it's not that there is female at one end and there is male at another end. Just want to clarify, Catherine, can you see components of human identity slide?
No, it's still on the genderbread person. I think we need to change. Yeah, now it's visible.
Yeah, I don't know how to do this thing that it goes on by itself.
No,
Okay.
it's visible now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm saying that I chose this picture because it was showing spectrums as infinities, which is also something that I also believe, and a lot of research scholars from the queer community have also said. When we talk about sex and gender, it's not a linear end to end. So it is not that it is between female and male and somewhere in between. It's an infinite loop of how feminine or how masculine or how gender fluid you are as a person with respect to your gender expression, with respect to your assign. Yeah.
Really so sorry. Would you wish to share the PPT with me? Because I think the components of the human identity, we are finding it difficult to read since it's not on a slideshow.
Uh, sure, I can do that. Yes, Catherine, I've sent you the PPT.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I received it. My colleague will be sharing it shortly.
Sure. Also, those who have continued this far, feel free to tell me if my pace is all right. Am I moving slow or fast, or if my language is all right?
Tamare, are you able to share the PPT? Can you move on to the next slide?
Okay. Is it fine?
Is this on slideshow?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still small. I don't know why. Um, are others able to read it?
Yeah, it's better now. Thank you.
Actually, the words are very.
It's
I think
small,
the
right?
font and font size is very small. That's why.
All right.
Yeah.
Uh, Nikita, if that's the case, I think we can continue.
Sure, no problem. I can
Yeah,
perhaps share a link to this picture later. It's easily available on my
yeah, sure,
internet.
sure,
Uh,
sure.
and I can just talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the um, identities or terminology that I wanted to share through this picture were, so as I said, the assigned sex at birth, it could be female, male, intersex, and some people who do not identify with the sex that they were assigned at birth may choose to write or call their sex as assigned male at birth or AMAB, or assigned female at birth AFAB. So, for example, me, my assigned sex at birth was female, and I may choose to call myself as female, or I may also choose to write or say my assigned sex as AFAB. Uh, the gender identity, again, it could be either in sync with the assigned sex at birth, or it could be different. I will not use the word opposite because, as I clarified, I do not see it as two ends. I see it as an infinite loop. So when we're talking about an infinite loop, it's better to call the gender identity, if it is different from the assigned sex, as different and not opposite. Yeah. So in terms of, if it is same as the sex assigned at birth, a person may choose to call themselves woman or man. Um, if it is different, they may choose to call themselves non-binary. Non-binary would mean that they do not, that the ideas of binary gender, binary meaning two, man and woman, does not apply to them, and they may choose to call themselves a non-binary person. They may also choose to call themselves trans. When they're calling themselves trans, it could be that either trans can also be seen as a spectrum. So a person who's assigned female sex at birth may identify as a man, so they may write their gender identity as simply a man, or also a trans man, if it suits their, if it matches with their with the label that they're giving themselves more clearly, they may choose to call themselves as a trans man. For legal matters as well, where as far as Indian legal understanding with the Nalsa judgment stands, my understanding is that um, if you any person who's assigned intersex at birth can also have in their legal documents written transgender, and if a person is going through transition at any point in their lives, a legal transition, a medical transition, surgical transition, and they choose to change that, reflect that change in their documents. Uh, I think the current thing is that it will be called the gender, that the legal documents will be called transgender. I think before 2018, a person could choose whether it will be called male or female. But I think the current legal understanding that I have is that the gender identity on their legal documents will be transgender. Okay. Some other common words, cisgender, definitely do want to talk about that, because we only talk about gender identities as if it only applies to people from the LGBTQ community. So, cisgender is a person whose gender identity matches with their assigned sex. For example, me, I am a cisgender person. My gender identity, that of a woman, matches with the assigned sex, that is female. Yeah. Okay. People could also be gender fluid, gender queer, pangender, agender, depending on which of these words and meanings best describes their own gender identity. You can find descriptions of any of these and more of these words in many of the queer and trans dictionaries that are easily available on the internet. Gender expression, as I said, is how a person presents and communicates their gender. So it includes their clothing style, their attire, their body language, their speech, and it could be masculine, feminine, androgynous, gender fluid, uh, any of these things. Um, Again, I would like to say, do not equate any of these things. So just because somebody identifies as a certain gender does not mean that you can need not be a very assumably or obviously equitable relationship. It's based on how a person best feels, describes their gender identity and expression. Okay, sexual orientation. I think many of you are relatively more aware of some of these um, uh, identities. Within the LGBTQ soup as well, lesbian, gay, um, bisexual, uh, trans is a gender identity, as I said. So not to be confused with the sexual identity. Heterosexual. Uh, and some of these which come more after the Q word in the alphabet soup: aromantic, asexual, pansexual, or demisexual. Uh, when you say asexual and aromantic, why are they written as two separate identities? Is because, as I said last slide as well, sexual and romantic attractions could be different or same. So if somebody is sexually attracted to two or more genders, they could identify as bisexual or pansexual. But it is possible that somebody who is not sexually attracted to any gender, but is definitely romantically attracted to one or more genders, they could still identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, or lesbian, gay, or also um, homo-romantic, pan-romantic, bi-romantic. Um, this last sentence over here, which is I think even smaller than the rest of the picture, but does talk about some of the umbrella terms in the LGBTQIA and 2S plus identities, including two-spirit, questioning, and queer. Queer and trans, these are two very umbrella terms that many of you might be aware of. Two spirit is also to do with both gender as well as sexuality, uh, and also questioning. So many a times we think that the Q is only for queer, but actually Q in the LGBTQI or LGBTQQQ, sometimes as it's called, is also for questioning folks. So the questioning folks means people could be some anywhere within any of these labels. Some people who are not yet very sure whether they are cisgender or heterosexual, cisgender and heterosexual or not, and are still may not be very sure whether they are queer and trans or not. So if at any point in that journey when they're trying to understand what label to give themselves, some people may choose to call themselves questioning overall, meaning that they have not yet arrived at any of these uh, more concrete labels. Okay, yeah. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. One very important part of just starting to understand gender and sexuality, and I think one of the questions that was also there, how to quote unquote litmus test a person for being queer affirmative. I think this is one of the starting points for anybody, not just a mental health professional, so to say, but anybody who tries to understand the meaning of pronouns in anybody's life. So, um, the more traditional pronouns that we're all aware of are she, her, it, and they. What we have been told from the very beginning is people who are assigned male at birth will use the pronouns he, him, his, and people who are assigned female at birth will use she, her, and hers. Yeah, and that does not really cover up everybody's gender identity or gender expression, right? I may choose to not use the labels, the pronouns she and her in order to best describe my own gender expression and my gender identity. I may find the pronoun they, which we have been told is for plural descriptors, and it for non-living objects. I may choose to identify as a person with pronouns they and it. I may also find it most comfortable to go with a combination of two pronouns. So, for example, she and they, because that best describes my gender identity and expression. Uh, so as I said, these are the four traditional pronouns: she, he, they, and it. And somebody could choose any combination of those pronouns, or they could also choose what is now called as neo pronouns or gender neutral pronouns. So it has been written by many queer and trans folks that even the pronoun they, even though the pronoun they is seen as gender neutral, sometimes it may limit their own gender expression, and they would rather choose to have a more gender neutral pronoun that is not that does not have the prior connotations that are attached to the traditional pronouns. So somebody might choose any of these which are there in this table, or could also be from any of the more more exhaustive neo pronouns as well. This is not an exhaustive list, by the way. One of the most common ones that I think I also see from many people around me and on my social media profiles is Z and uh, Z. And yes, in the beginning, if you are not someone who uses these pronouns, you might find it difficult to grasp the pronunciation at first, but yes, just the way we've learned everything, we also learn these things as well. It's not rocket science. It's not as difficult as I think it has become through social media from certain people that I don't understand this pronouns business yet. It's not as difficult as we've made it out to be. Everybody in at a certain age, even in childhood, learns what pronouns are, and at that age it is difficult. You do not understand why you need pronouns, why you can't just keep on repeating a person's name throughout the entire paragraph. But yes, the way we learn to use who to use she for, who to use he for, who to use they for, the same way we can always learn who to use z and they for and we for. And it's as simple as that. If you want, there you could take a note of some of these uses, and also or later find out on Google. Um, I have taken this badge and I liked it very much, uh, because sometimes what happens is that it becomes, um, sometimes an assumption that since a person looks a certain way, their pronouns must be either this or this, based on our understanding of how we see queer and trans bodies. So it's always okay to ask anybody what their pronouns are. And the same way you would ask anybody, may I know your name? The same way you can ask anybody, may I know your pronouns? Okay, can we go to the next slide? Um, yeah, okay. So this might be a little uh, a lecture like, but just wanted to talk about this. This charmed circle, which is a concept by a queer theorist from the 1980s and 90s. She talked about how certain genders and how certain sexual acts and personalities are seen as either good, normal, blessed, or as bad, abnormal, and unnatural. So these two circles she made. This might also be a little difficult to read, but I'll just talk about what the two circles mean. So in the inner circle, she's tried to write some of the sexual personalities and activities, for example, heterosexual, married, monogamous, procreative, free, yeah, in a relationship, same generation, at home, with no pornography. And these are within the inner circle, meaning that these are considered good, normal, natural, blessed, or acceptable. Yeah. So anybody who is having a sexual relationship within a heterosexual, married, monogamous relationship with people from the same generation, and the sex is free of course, and it is for procreative purposes, so not for pleasure purposes but for reproduction only. um, and it is happening at home without the use of any pornography, and without the use of any sexual objects. These are all considered acceptable ways to be in a sexual relationship. The ones that are outside the circle, for example, homosexual, promiscuous, non procreative, for money, alone or in group of more than two people, is considered bad or unnatural, and is not acceptable within the limits of the society. So this circle, these concentric circles she drew in order for us to understand that it is societal expectations that puts a person's sexuality and gender and their sexual and romantic relationship in lines of acceptable or non-acceptable. It is nothing biological or natural. It is only society, it is only moralistic norms that are made from people within the society, and who are most of these people who themselves belong to the inner circle. And thus, what happens to the people outside the circle, there forms a cycle of um, um, inequality and discrimination and marginality. And um, these cycles go on perpetuating. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide? So, what I want us to do is, if you all have access to a paper, pen, colors, anything, um, any piece of paper and any pen would do. You need not share it or show it to anybody. This is just an individual activity which you can do. Um, so I think um, all of us grow up believing certain ideas about how gender and sexuality works, how certain acts of gender expression are seen versus other, how sexuality is seen as acceptable and non-acceptable. So I would request all of you to take a few minutes, remember perhaps some of the teachings that you had from your families, from media, your friends, any of the people who hold any power in society. and draw these ideas in the inner or the outer circle, just like in the charm circle. So in the inner circle, you can just write down some of the gender and sexuality related societal ideas which are considered acceptable, good, normal. And in the outer circle, you can write down certain ideas that are considered unacceptable, bad, or quote unquote abnormal. Uh, can everyone do that in about 3 to 4 minutes? Whatever instances and teachings that you can recall from your childhood or even adulthood. Does anyone want me to repeat the activity, or is it clear?
I think it's clear.
So, as I'm saying, feel free to write whatever comes to your mind. Uh, I would request a couple of people if they could share it after they've written it down. You need not show it to anybody, and if you do not feel comfortable sharing it, that's also fine. But I would request a couple of people to share it. Okay, so, can we take about 2 to 3 minutes to do this?
Yeah, sure.
Perhaps we can keep the previous slide on the screen so that people also get an idea. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so if some of the people have written certain ideas and do have do want to share, please feel free to either type it in the chat box or share uh, with your mic on. You need not have made an entire circle with all the even if you just want to share one of the teachings that you remember uh, for the inner circle and the outer circle, that will also be good. Perhaps to get the ball rolling, I can probably share some of the things that are coming to my mind as I'm also thinking about it. I do remember, uh, I am not very sure if this came from my family as well or just the media, that the sexual relationship should not be initiated from the female or feminine person. It has to be initiated from the male or the masculine person in the relationship. And that is something that I still carried on well into my adulthood before I started questioning a lot of these things. Anyone wants to share anything that's coming to their mind?
Uh, Hi, I'm getting one.
Yeah.
So I keep this sort of stems from my childhood. Like men should do some sort of sports, especially like cricket. If you're not playing cricket, if you don't play cricket, then you're not a man. Like this
Yeah.
kind of.
Yes, yes. If you're not into masculine, sports that have been typically assigned the masculine expression, you're not man enough. Yeah.
There's one comment on the chat box.
Yeah. While the labels help in spreading awareness, they are also a way of categorizing people, further making discrimination also easier. Shouldn't inclusion and equality ideally lead to getting rid of these labels? Okay. Um, Depends on where the labels are coming from. So, as that's why that is why we've many of people who are writing about queer feminist perspectives have started saying it's assigned sex and not biological sex. It's also the sex is also assigned by people from within the society. So, um, when we do talk about labels, yes, they can be a starting point of discrimination because, of course, uh, they are a way of categorizing. But it is also about who is using the label. Is it an assigned label or is it a self identified label? So I choose to call myself cisgender. Yes, I was assigned female at birth, but when I did start questioning my gender and sexuality, I started calling myself cisgender and queer. So that queer here, in solely speaking from my own experience, yes, is a label, but that has also helped me in embracing my own gender and sexuality. It need not help any other person. Some people may choose to go without labels at all. Um, but yes, more from what I've heard from people from the queer and trans communities, many of these labels are uh, reclaimed and self-chosen. So sometimes they give you power as well. Labels carry a lot of power. So it depends on where the power is coming from. If it's an assigned label, yes, the power is held from the person who has the power to discriminate and oppress as well. But if the label is coming from within the person, if it's a self identified, self chosen label, it's also possible that I hold the power. I hold the power who can access my understanding of gender and sexuality and who cannot. So, yeah, I think depends on where the label is coming from and who is using it and how. Yeah, I do have some of the responses for the charm circle. Boys don't cry was a huge one growing up. Yes, men don't do makeup. Another stereotype is that girls are expected to dress up and play with dolls. Yes, men can't put on bright colors. Okay, yeah, this is something that my father always still does. Being in friendship circles of opposite gender for non-romantic reason. Okay, yeah, yeah. Yes, these have been very common uh, ideas of how gender and sexuality and also romanticism should be played in any kind of relationships, and how any person born on the face of the earth should be behaving, whether respect to their own gender or whether respect to any other person's gender. Yes. Okay. While I do see a lot of these responses are about gender stereotypes, I would also request some people to ponder more on stereotypes that have been given to them with respect to sexuality and sexual relationships as well, and also some of the still held on to teachings. I'm sure there are also, apart from these, other teachings that you still hold on to. Yeah. So, for example, um, it's only been recently, I think, that I have also started educating myself on how a person's pronoun does not tell me anything about their gender identity or gender expression. If a person is choosing they them pronouns, it's really uh, no way, there's no way for me to assume what their gender identity could be. I can say okay, they might be trans, but I could be very well wrong just because they're choosing they them pronouns. So yeah, while these are very good, also take this as a go along and keep on pondering on what are still some of the gender and sexuality related stereotypes that many of us are holding on to. Okay. Yes. So, yes, as we're talking about, uh, from these examples that you've also written, I see a lot about how boys and men need to be very masculine and need not show their emotional side, need not interact with anybody from the other gender unless they want to be in a romantic or sexual relationship. Uh, and yes, this form of basis of the discrimination and marginality that we have been talking about from the beginning. This inner circle puts certain people in positions of power, and most of the representation then that you see, whether with respect to media or yeah, sorry, I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Yes. Um, Yeah, so the representation then that comes through media, through policies, through our legal institutions, medical institutions, school, academia, that representation mostly is of and by the people who are in the inner circle. And the outer circle people do get ridden of the power, do get ridden of the freedom of their own gender and sexuality, and basically any other expression that they want to assert. Can we go to the next slide? Next. Yeah. These are some of the common myths that I have written down. I would request if the font is all right, so people can read it. And I would also like to go through the chat box because I think there's a lot that's coming up.
The font is perfect. I think we can read it. It's visible.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Should I read those comments in the chat box?
No, no, I'm just going through them.
Oh,
Yes. Very, very agree with all the comments that are there in the chat box. Yes, Rohit, I agree very strongly. It is seen as the ultimate goal, whether you are assigned a male person or a female person. Yes, there are differences in the way they're seen, of course, but also being in a married, monogamous, sexually active, heteronormative, heterosexual relationship is the ultimate goal of life. And if you are not doing that, what are you even doing? Yeah? Whether you're studying or doing anything else, that's all secondary. The primary goal has to be this. Okay. What's a non-normative gender? The idea that a normal gender exists in the first place sounds weird. Yes, of course. So, okay, all right. Thank you very much, Mukul, for posting that question. I did not explain very well what was my understanding of normative and non-normative terminologies. So, yes, precisely as you said, anything that is normal sounds weird in the first place. The idea of normal exists and has been applied to gender, sexuality, mental health, mental status, emotional expressions, and anything, literally anything that you can think of. And we have categorized very well, very conveniently, anything into two categories: normal and not normal or abnormal. Now, in order for queer theorists to talk about gender and sexuality, they had to break the idea of normal, but at the same time, they needed some words in order to, talk about gender and sexualities which are beyond the binary, which are beyond the ones that people understand. What then came up was the terminology of normative and non-normative. Normative means things or ideas that are considered normal. I'm not saying that they are normal, I'm saying that they are considered normal by uh, the society. And when I say society, of course it means a lot of people in the society, not just lay people, medical institutions and legal institutions and everything that we talk about. So non-normative is are all the identities, all the concepts that are not considered so-called normal. So when we are saying, when from a queer feminist lens, you are saying the words normative and non-normative, it is very much clear that you are not using the words normal and abnormal. What it means is that you understand that some concepts and some identities have been labeled as normal and some as abnormal, and what you wish to do by calling them normative and non-normative is critique why they are called normal and abnormal, but at the same time include your idea of gender beyond the binary. Yeah, so when I say non-normative gender and sexual identities, I mean any and every identities that is beyond the traditional binary understood identity of male, female, and heterosexual. Does that answer your question? Okay, if there's a follow-up question, please feel free to ask. Okay, yeah, so some of the common myths, I hope some of you have already gone through them. One of the most common ones as a mental health professional that I've come across, and I do want to talk about it here, is that homosexuality arises as a result of childhood sexual abuse, which is an absolutely wrong notion to have, and also in fact harmful, because I'm sure a lot of you are aware that sexual abuse, and especially childhood sexual abuse, is quite common and rampant, um, not just in India but globally. And we have quantitative, qualitative, all kinds of studies that say that this has no relation, this has no standing whatsoever. If it were, we would definitely have more people who identified as LGBT, because so many people do go through sexual abuse irrespective of their gender. Yes, we do see some skewed statistics for female identifying children, but everyone, many people, irrespective of their gender, do go through sexual abuse. And to assume that it was that sexual abuse or a bad sexual relationship that led them to have a queer and trans identity is absolutely harmful for any person, and also for in general any understanding of gender and sexuality. Okay. Do want to talk about this corrective and conversion treatment. Um, some of you might have heard of the recent um, uh, Kerala High Court judgment of banning conversion treatment. Conversion treatment, as a mental health professional, what I'm aware of is when in the 1960s, 70s, homosexuality was starting to be written off as an abnormality, as a psychiatric disorder. uh, there were theorists, there were people who came up with the idea of curing homosexuality, something which has now very, very clearly been understood as a very harmful and oppressive practice. Homosexuality, same-sex relationships, trans identities have nothing to cure. They have nothing abnormal. They have absolutely nothing that needs to be changed or corrected. And conversion treatments, so that they were called, from the 90s, 60s, and 70s, are very well now understood to be pseudoscience and have nothing that can help anybody. So, yes, I really do hope that we go on with more such judgments, and like many other countries, we also put an absolute ban on conversion treatments. Yes, yes, Mukul, I agree with you. Um, Folks who are very comfortable with their queer identity are also often subjected. Yes, that remains to be a very hard-hitting reality. People who are very comfortable, people who have embraced, accepted, affirmed their own gender and sexuality, um, it does become very difficult to change everyone around you. If everyone around you is of the idea that there is something wrong, it becomes absolutely and extremely difficult. And yes, that vulnerability and that subject to this most harmful practice still exists. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. While we have started talking about uh, conversion treatments, uh, it's been a very sad reality of the mental health fraternity to have uh, given birth to something called a conversion treatment. And even though there do exist certain apologies from American and British therapeutic and psychiatric associations for having given birth to such a practice, there are certain things in place now to address some of the unique stressors that are related to, as I said, um, the non-normative gender and sexual experiences. So there is this uh, a six component model that has been given by two theorists, Ketki Ranade and Shruti Chakravarti, uh, both of them based out in Mumbai and very much accessible through their social media platforms and email IDs. Shruti Chakravarti you can easily follow on Instagram by the handle polyamorous, if anyone needs to. Why I'm talking about this is because we have somehow this understanding from the, as part of science students that people who write such things are very inaccessible. So, want to iterate that these two people um, very um, am I audible now?
We lost you for a few seconds, but yeah, now it's audible.
Okay, yeah. So I was talking about some of the unique stressors that are experienced by people from the queer and trans community. And as I said before, the the source of these stressors is external mostly. The source is because of the non-acceptance, the discrimination that is experienced and that is subjected against the um, people from the queer and trans communities. So what that non-acceptance many times does is create this incongruence and something that we still call internalized homophobia or internalized homonegativity. Many of us still carry on well into our adult lives this idea that there is something wrong with me because I do not feel the way other cis heterosexual people feel around me. I do not experience the same sexual desires. I do not experience the same the gender identity that was assigned to me at birth, and then that means there must be something wrong with me. This is called internalized homonegativity, and it does take a lot of time, patience, support for any person uh, to to deal with this, to remind themselves that there's nothing wrong with them, that it's the source of that non-acceptance, that negativity is external and not internal. Many children, also people who come out late in their adulthood, do feel this incongruence between their assigned and experienced gender and sexuality, and it can become very isolating to deal with this. Any person who's told from the age of 1 2 years old, I mean it's obviously anyway told from the day a person is born that they are of a certain gender, but there are people who even remember from the age of 3 that they were told that you're a boy or you're a girl, and they did not feel that they were a boy or a girl. They were either some other gender, or in fact remember them feeling a lot more comfortable and acceptable from within when they expressed themselves in a gender that was not assigned to them at birth. This incongruence can lead to a lot of mental health concerns because of the loneliness that is experienced, because of the denial that is experienced of their gender and sexual experiences. Coming out can be a very overwhelming experience for many people. Um, um, there are people who choose to come out early on in life. There are people who choose to hold it and perhaps see who to come out to and whom not to. do want to clarify it here that coming out is never a one-time experience. One extra, not just one, a part of many extra efforts and labor that people from the queer and trans community have to do is come out multiple times to multiple people, and people who may be all right with it, who may be uh, actively aggressive towards them, who may be indifferent to them. There can be all sorts of people, and it is never a one time activity. Many people, in fact, I personally also know, and yes, it has been talked about from people through writings as well, that they need to come out to the same people also over and over again, and it becomes very frustrating, uh, especially families and friends who they do care about, who they want to understand, who they want to see them as a person of a certain gender and sexual identity. It also leads to problems in expressing their identity, as it leads to invisibility. Um, there are there's something I call as and has been called as femme invisibility as well. So assumption that a person looking a certain kind will not be sexually active, and this has been attached most with people who are femme identifying or femme expressing, people who are feminine expressing in their gender. um, it is a common notion that people who express themselves as feminine will not be very sexually active or are not seen as sexual beings. There have been many writings from even Indian writers from the 80s and 90s, and even from people from rural backgrounds, how two women, two feminine expressing women, or even two women who are just assigned female at birth, are seen as non sexual. So even if you have been living all your life with the same partner but never could give it a name, because perhaps in the 80s and 90s you did not have a name for that relationship, but never got married or got married and left that person, and have been living with this female partner, but you're not seen as a sexual being, you're just seen as two female friends just sharing a space. And that leads to invisibility of their own relationship. While we celebrate heterosexual relationships, married relationships, where is the celebration of a same-sex relationship? Where is the celebration of a gender identity that does not conform to society's ideals? There's no celebration of that. There's not even an acceptance of that. That does lead to, uh, again, as I said, loneliness. Relationships also do start getting affected. Couple relationships and also other partner relationships uh, do get impacted because of all this. If a person themselves is carrying this frustration, this loneliness, this own invisibility, this extra labor of coming out again and again, their own internalized human negativity, it is bother into relationships as well, and not just within the relationship. There is so much extra stress that you come when you come out as gay with someone. I remember one of my professors talking about this. So yes, you come out as a queer person, you come out as gay. Yeah, one is that one whole big experience is that, and then also along with it, another big experience is coming out gay with someone. You're not just gay alone, right? You could be very well in a relationship, so you are in a queer relationship with someone else as well, and that becomes another ball game of coming out and explaining to people how your relationship even works, and also to then keep on educating people. I'm not saying that um, this education doesn't need to happen, but yes, it is an extra effort and an extra labor to sometimes explain to people how a same-sex relationships work. um, I'm not saying that it works very differently from a heterosexual relationship, but yes, there are certain aspects of your relationship that are different. For example, there may not be any uh, typical masculine and feminine gender in the relationship. But many times, what you're asked is, oh, who's the man in the relationship? Whereas there is no man in the relationship if it's a lesbian relationship. Um, at the core of all these experiences and emotions is also mental health concerns. With this extra efforts, with this discrimination that starts from very early on, this internal incongruence also that starts from very early on, the experiences of gender dysphoria that can happen from very early on in childhood and can go on very strongly into adolescence if a person does not have any support system to understand or to articulate their gender experiences. It can really take a toll on the person's mental health, which is also historically has been seen as, oh, okay, perhaps you're depressed because you're gay, whereas it's not seen as this external stress that is put on a queer person, which then takes a toll on their mental health. Why would I be depressed if I had enough support systems to come out as queer? Yeah. And then this entire mental health, I like to put it as a center as well, because it then feeds into other aspects of the rest of the variables. If you are already struggling with your mental health, then coming out to someone another becomes another kind of an experience, because you're already experiencing a certain kind of stress. And then dealing with the invisibility, the relationships, the internalized homonegativity can become all the more difficult as well. Yeah. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Yes, I would like to acknowledge this one comment that I see here. Thank you very much for pointing out. I do agree with this word hypervisibility, and yes, very much acceptable to trans women. And not just transphobia, Mukul, here, you also see trans misogyny playing another role. Yes, transphobia as a general aspect, of course, but also the fact that trans women are subjected to this hyper visibility has also to do with trans misogyny. Uh, the fact that women, both cis and trans, are seen as the lesser, then makes it even more, intersectionally difficult for trans women to just be, to just live. Yes. A lot of the harassment and attacks, yes, I am, I know what you're talking about, and um, it does come up as a very harsh reality that happens. Yeah. Okay. I would like us to see this documentary, um, which is on sorry. I would just take a moment to play this. I wanted to show something from the Indian academic spaces or Indian students that talks about um, experiences of being in the campus, coming out, celebrating pride marches, and obviously, yes, the challenges that are experienced as being queer and trans on campus. I couldn't find many things that were relevant, but this one that does talk about it. It's a short documentary of 6 minutes. Can we play this?
Ma'am, should I present this one? That video?
Uh, yes, yes.
Okay,
Can you
sure.
play it, or should
Sure.
I play it?
Tamara, you'll have to click on the link.
I think he might have to go. Yeah. Okay. I don't think we can hear it.
Tamra, you need to turn on your, you need to unmute. We are not able to hear it.
Actually, I unmuted also, but
Are you able to hear?
I can able to hear.
Okay. Nikita, can we do something on this?
I think we have to download it and
Yeah, just a second. I am also trying to see if I can play it.
Hariram shared it here in the chat box.
Okay.
I'll try to share my screen. I've clicked on the link. I'll try to share the screen. Let me know if it's
Yeah.
audible.
Please.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it, but still cannot hear it.
You're not able to hear?
No.
Uh,
Okay. Uh, that's a bummer. Okay, no problem. I think if people can watch it later, that's also.
give me 2 minutes. I'll download it and I'll try to play it.
Yeah, if
I
you can
think
do that.
I think we can go ahead with like we have the
Yeah,
link. We will watch it.
yeah, yeah. People who do want to watch, please feel free to copy the link or save it. Or perhaps, Catherine, you can also share it later if needed.
Yeah, sure, sure.
I
The
have
link is
downloaded
here.
that one. Shall I try once?
Okay, sure. Also, Catherine, can you tell me if I'm exceeding the time?
Yeah, sure. We have 20 minutes more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, still can't hear it. Probably something wrong with the background sound only.
I think we
Okay.
can watch it individually. We'll go ahead
Yeah.
with the present. Yeah.
Yeah, that will be better, I guess. Okay. Can we come back to the presentation then? I had thought of a small discussion to take up on the basis of the video, but that's okay. Can we go to the next slide? Can we go to the next slide, please?
Tamari, can you please change the slide?
Okay. Yeah, we can still talk about this. So, some as we started already we've already started talking about some of the things that do happen uh, within campus spaces, within family spaces, with respect to coming out, with experiences of invisibility and mental health concerns. I would also like to understand if um, if people here have been able to think of some of the actions that have helped them in the past in accepting and affirming their own gender and sexuality. One, that. Uh, so, what has helped you from another person and any response, any action of another person in accepting and affirming your own gender and sexuality, and another, your own actions towards another person in helping them accept and affirm their own gender and sexuality. So, if you can take a couple of minutes just to think about this and jot down, uh, uh, it will be helpful. You can type in the chat box or you can share. Um, Try to think of even the tiniest actions that you think might have helped a person. If you are still in touch with people after coming out, what from their own actions has helped you be in touch with them? Or also, if after someone came out to you, they have been in touch with you, what do you think was your response that helped them trust in you? This could be a person from campus or from outside the campus, family, friends, anybody, even your counselors. Okay, yes, reading and getting educated about the LGBTQ identities and inclusion has helped. Okay, anything else coming to mind? Anyone? Are people still thinking, or want me to move on? Yeah, I think somebody is trying to speak.
I think if there's no response, we can move ahead.
Okay, sure. Okay, can we go to the next slide?
There is one comment in the chat box.
Yes. Oh, okay, there's one more. When I came out to my mother, her first reaction was to ensure that I don't fall prey to bad visits. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I know what you mean. Yeah. It wasn't the fact that, oh, you know, um, you might have fallen prey to something bad, but it was the concern for you that I hope you find people who understand you. Yeah. Okay. If anything else also comes to mind, please feel free to put it in the chat box. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so just briefly going to talk about this. Um, we are talking about ourselves as a student body, as belonging to an institution, and it is important to understand how to build queer affirmative spaces. So, some of the things that are to be kept, that as that you can start off with, is using queer affirmative language. So we have talked about more gender neutral, open ended language, more pronouns that could be used if you're not aware of a person's pronouns, and it's perfectly all right, as I said, to ask a person what their pronouns are. um, Starting off with that, I think does make the other person feel that you might be open to understanding gender and sexuality more openly. Yeah? And it also helps in building a general space which makes sure that people of all genders and all sexualities are welcome and included. Yeah. Querying the infrastructure also will help. So sometimes what we see as posters, brochures for any college events, any classroom activities, if we can also include uh, people whose gender expression is also beyond the binary, and people who um, do not appear to be in only a heterosexual relationship. So many times these mainstream posters and magazines that you see do uh, represent only cisgender and heterosexual appearing people, and it will be a good idea to have a healthy representation of different expressions as well on any of the college related or classroom related posters or brochures. Convey your preferred name and pronoun as well. Why I say preferred? There can be people whose the name that they were assigned, the name that they were given at birth, still might be their legal name, but they do not identify with their name, with that name anymore. And while they may not have they may not have the option, or may not choose to go about legally changing their name, they may choose a different name. So it's always all right if you think that if a person is conveying to you that so and so is my legal name or dead name, but I like to be called by this name, so make sure that you call them by the name that they are telling you to call them with, and of course the pronouns. Facilitating self acceptance. So, I did talk about internalized homonegativity as well, and it's important to understand that the source of that distress is not many a times internal. Many a times a person logically understands that there's nothing wrong with me, but still the way the entire cis heteronormativity is present around all of us, it does make one question whether I am, you know, so-called normal or not. And in times of those, it's important to remind yourself that this distress is coming from outside, and it's all right to seek help in those situations. That's like help could come from within the community as well, from people who you think have had their own experiences of understanding their queer and trans acceptance, people who have talked about it on different forums, maybe. So, connecting to the community can help. Also, reaching out to queer affirmative counselors and other service providers can also help. Advocacy is also very important. So again, answering to one of the very beginning, initially asked questions, how to litmus test a person of being queer affirmative. I think it's very important for a person or a body by body I mean student body, college body, admin body, whoever needs to also advocate themselves as queer and trans affirmative, because otherwise you can't keep on assuming who is queer affirmative and who is not, right? Also keeping updates on queer events, social media, educating and sensitizing yourself as well as others around you can also help. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide?
There's one comment to the previous list of questions we've
Yes.
asked.
Allowing people to choose their name in the roll call and the pronouns to be addressed by in class by the professors. Yes, thank you very much for putting that out here. Uh, will be a very important part of querying the infrastructure and the space. Um, I do understand the importance of having to choose your name on the roll call, because every time being reminded of the legal or the dead name can become very overwhelming. I do understand this. Yes. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Um, I have already spoken about some of the things, but yes, since I think I've also spoken a lot and running short of time, it might be a good idea to take this as something to be kept in the chat box. According to you, what does a gender and sexuality inclusive campus look like? We've talked about some of the things and this very recent um, idea that you've put forth of allowing people to choose their name in the roll call. Uh, yes. Um, any other suggestions also that you think can make your campus more affirmative? Gender neutral washrooms and housing. Yes, very important. I have been a student of TISS Mumbai, and only in 2018 did finally the admin agree to build a gender neutral hostel, with gender neutral washrooms, of course. Which did come up with their own set of challenges. But yes, that was a good starting point for a university in India to come up with that. Any other things that you imagine, ideate of, which can make which you think makes a campus more queer and transformative? This can also be taken up as a takeaway, perhaps. And if still anyone wants to write in the chat box, feel free to do that. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. To end, these are some of the resources that I could think of, and I've tried to put them here. The first three, four are support spaces, including professionals, including queer and trans communities, as in queer and trans identified people who run some of these helplines, some of these services. Swikar support group, which has been made by a group of parents of queer and trans identifying people in Mumbai. They do have an active Facebook and Instagram page. You can follow that, and it might help some of you who are trying to come out to your parents and trying to educate them as well. There are some other social media as well as Google websites, namely Orinam, Mariwala Health Initiative, Good as You, It Gets Better project. It Gets Better project is a Canadian project for uh, young queer and trans identifying people to to reassure, to talk about, in a way, to pass on some wisdom from older queer and trans folks, because it's very rare, especially in, I think, Indian culture, because I also grew up believing that there are no older queer and trans people around me, and it can become very isolating, to not have any role models to tell you how and what to keep in mind when coming out, what to keep in mind when choosing a certain label for yourself or not choosing a certain label for yourself, what to keep in mind when going to seek a counselor, what to ask them, what to tell them, so that they can also understand you better. And this helps. This website has also helped me, although from a Canadian perspective, to understand what is it that older queer and trans folks have also been going through. and some of their wisdom. And finally, also, as the name suggests, to assure that it does get better. It is overwhelming, it is difficult, but it does get better. And I would also, I think, like to uh, pass on that assurance and end on that note that it does get better. Um, yeah. Um, this was from my end. I would be happy if there are any comments or question answers that are still left, and if I can
Yeah.
answer.
Nikita, there are a few more comments the students have left on the chat box.
Sensitizing the campus staff, not just the faculty and students, about pride. Yes, absolutely important. Um, okay, okay. I don't know if I'll be okay. This document, I don't know if I can read this. Um, um, but if you want me to read this, please take my email ID from Catherine, and you can send it to me on my email ID. I would be happy to read this. Yeah, we can start with educating the campus about LGBTQ plus all students, faculties, and other staffs. Most people don't even acknowledge the presence. Yes, I do see you. I hear you as us. Yes. It has been difficult for us queer and trans people to make people acknowledge the presence, uh, to even come to a point where I think to be seen as within the student body. I do remember experiences where it was assumed that they're others, yeah, and not a part of the so-called general student body. But we're very much there. We're everywhere, in all campuses, in all countries, and very much, of course, our country. Yeah. Um, okay. Any other comments or questions that are still there? Uh, Catherine, is it all right if I leave my email ID in the chat box, and if people want to reach out to me, they can?
Yeah, sure, sure, sure.
Yeah. I have left my email ID. I hope I tried to cater to some of the expectations that many of you came with, and uh, it was good to see the interaction going on throughout the 2 hour workshop on the chat. And I am also taking away a lot of ideas, suggestions on how um, perhaps these discussions can keep going on. Yeah, it was a good interaction with all of you. I do would like to acknowledge this was not an exhaustive mental health workshop. So if any of you, whether after this workshop or during, if some of your friends have left, if there have been any overwhelming experiences, any triggers that might have come up during this interaction, please do reach out to people around you, the friends who you trust, families who you trust, uh, the counselors that are there. And if you want to write to me, please feel free to do that as well. That's all from my end, I guess.
So I think we have almost come to the end of the workshop. So there's one comment, I mean question. Yeah, Rohit, we will be sharing it with you, and also it's in the posters. The posters are being pasted up, put up on all notice boards, on hostels and mess, and I think all over. It's been circulated all over, but still we will be sharing your, our mail IDs with you. So if there are no further questions, so I would like to take up the vote of thanks. So it's been a quite comprehensive introductory workshop We know that this is not a very common topic that we used to talk or something that comes up very often in the campus. But today has been a initiative from the Wellness Center Committee side to talk about the LGBTQ community as well as their experiences. And I really want to thank Ms. Nikita for enlightening us with her experience and her thoughts about the same. And we've had an opportunity for these 2 hours to hear about all the experiences that the students have been experiencing, as well as whatever you as a mental health professional you had experienced with your clients in the field. So it's been really encouraging for us. It's been a really a very comprehensive one, where we understood about the components of human identity. There's been about, beautifully you said about the gender bred person and about how we can make the campus even more LGBTQ affirmative. I think it starts from today. It starts as a workshop today, and we include, as a mental health professional as well as including the community, we would take even more initiatives to make it more friendlier, LGBTQ friendlier, both at the professor, the faculty level, as well as the entire institute level. So I would really thank Ms. Nikita for spending your time as well as your knowledge, as well as I thank the participants for being more interactive. Otherwise, I feel that it would have been more monotonous. I really thank the participants for coming out and making it even more interactive. Thank you. So, yes, we will be sharing our, Tamare has shared the link about the Wellness Center, IISc Wellness Center. It has a mail ID and the details of all the social workers and the psychologists and the psychiatrists in the campus. So feel free to text us there. I will also share my number. So you can call me directly. So I thank Ms. Nikita once again on behalf of the Wellness Center. Thank you, and thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you for having me here. Thank you to all the participants. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Nikita.